In 2013, Ma, a wildlife rehabilitator, visited a rescue center intending only to temporarily foster a young bobcat cub in need. But everything changed the moment she met Bug. With a warm, unguarded gaze that seemed to defy her wild nature and an extraordinary gesture, Bug immediately captured Mart. Within minutes, Ma knew this wasn't going to be temporary. Their connection wasn't just about rehabilitation. It was as if two lost souls had finally found each other. How did a creature meant for solitude become a source of healing for a grieving woman and then an entire community? It wasn't just behavior. It was a kind of love language. This is the story of Lily Bug. Affectionately called Bug, a bobcat unlike any other. Known not for fierce growls or wild instincts, but for showing affection in the most surprising way. She hugs everyone she meets. Before we start, hit the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. The soft Oregon drizzle did little to dampen the determined spirit of Ma Thorne. At 57, with silver streaks woven through her auburn hair like threads of moonlight, she possessed an energy that belied the quiet sorrow etched around her kind blue eyes. It had been 5 long years since her husband David had lost his battle with cancer, leaving a void in their cozy farmhouse nestled at the edge of the Willamette National Forest. Her work as a wildlife rehabilitator, once a shared passion, now served as her solitary anchor, a way to channel her nurturing instincts and quiet the persistent ache of loneliness. One crisp October morning in 2013, the phone jangled, pulling Ma from her meticulous record-keeping. It was Sarah Jenkins from the Cascade Wildlife Rescue, a larger facility an hour's drive away. "America, dear, we've got a situation." Sarah's voice was tinged with its usual urgency. A young bobcat cub, female, maybe 6 weeks old. Hikers found her near a logged area. No sign of Mama. She's weak, dehydrated, but feisty enough. "We're swamped here. Could you possibly foster her short-term? Just until we can find a more permanent placement or if, miracle of miracles, she's suitable for release program later." Ma hesitated. Bobcats were a different league. Her expertise lay more with injured raptors, orphaned fawns, the occasional bewildered beaver. A wild cat, even a cub, required specialized care and, more importantly, emotional detachment to prepare it for the wild. "Short-term," she echoed, the words feeling heavy. "Sarah, you know my stance on apex predators. The goal is always release. I don't want to imprint." I know. Sarah cut in gently. "But she needs intensive one-on-one care right now. You're the best we've got for that kind of initial critical nursing. Just a few weeks, Ma. Get her strong, please." The plea in Sarah's voice, combined with the image of a tiny orphaned predator, chipped away at Ma's resolve. "All right, Sarah. I'll come get her." The drive to Cascade Wildlife Rescue was filled with a mix of apprehension and a flicker of something akin to anticipation. Ma reminded herself of the protocols. Limited handling, mimicking natural feeding, avoiding direct eye contact that could be interpreted as a challenge or worse, a bond. At the center, the air was thick with the scent of disinfectant, animal feed, and underlying wild musk. Sarah, a whirlwind of khaki and boundless energy, led Ma to a quiet, temperature-controlled room. In a large straw-filled carrier, a small tufted-eared creature lay curled into a tight ball. Its spotted coat, designed for camouflage, seemed to shimmer under the fluorescent lights. "We've named her Lily for now," Sarah whispered. "Though she's acting more like a little bug all curled up." Ma knelt, her gaze softening despite her professional intentions. The cub was impossibly small, its paws delicate, its breathing shallow. As Sarah gently lifted the cub for a quick health check, Ma saw its eyes properly for the first time. They weren't the fierce yellow-gold slits of a wild hunter, but a surprisingly warm, almost amber hue, wide and unguarded. They locked onto Mikas, and for a breath-topping moment the world seemed to fall away. There was no fear in that gaze, no feral suspicion, just a profound searching look that resonated deep within Ma's own lonely soul. She's something else," Ma murmured, her voice barely a whisper. Sarah, busy with a syringe of electrolyte solution, nodded. "She hasn't hissed or spat once, just watches." The cub, whom Ma found herself already calling Bug in her mind, was indeed a bug. Tiny, fragile, yet with an undeniable tenacity. Back at her farmhouse, Ma set up a large enclosure in her spare room, complete with branches for climbing, a den-like box, and soft bedding. The first few days were a blur of bottle-feeding specialized formula, monitoring her temperature, and willing the little creature to live. Bug was weak, often listless, but she never refused food from Ma, her tiny pink tongue lapping delicately. Ma adhered strictly to the non-imprinting protocols, wearing gloves, keeping her voice low and neutral. Yet, Bug seemed to defy these efforts. During feedings, she would often stop suckling for a moment, her amber eyes fixing on Ma's face. Not with a wild animal's assessment, but with something that felt disconcertingly like recognition. One evening, about a week into Bug's stay, Ma was exhausted. She'd been up late tending to a barn owl with a broken wing and had risen before dawn for Bug's feeding. As she carefully lifted Bug from her warm box for her meal, the cub did something entirely unexpected. Instead of just accepting the bottle, Bug, with surprising strength for her small size, pushed her front paws against Ma's chest. She didn't claw, didn't struggle. She simply rested them there, her tiny head tilting to press against Ma's shoulder. Then she nuzzled, a soft rumbling purr vibrating through Ma's shirt. Ma froze. This wasn't in the manual. This wasn't wild behavior. It was an embrace. A tiny, fragile bobcat hug. Her heart so long guarded, constricted with an emotion she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. It was a rush of warmth, of connection, so potent it brought tears to her eyes. She gently stroked Bug's soft fur, the professional detachment shattering into a million pieces. "Oh, Bug," she whispered, her voice thick. "What am I going to do with you?" From that day on, their relationship transformed. Ma still intended to prepare Bug for a life in the wild, if possible, but the emotional wall had crumbled. Bug, it turned out, was an exceptionally affectionate creature. Every feeding was accompanied by this gentle pressing of paws, this nuzzle against Ma's neck or shoulder. It wasn't demanding or desperate. It was a quiet, tender offering. As Bug grew stronger and more mobile, her unique form of affection became more pronounced. If Ma sat on the floor near the enclosure, Bug would come to the wire mesh, not to pace or hiss, but to rub against it, purring like a miniature motor. When Ma entered the enclosure to clean or refresh water, Bug would trot over, stand on her hind legs, and gently place her front paws around Ma's legs, resting her head for a moment before stepping back. The weeks turned into a month. Bug was thriving. Her coat was sleek, her eyes bright, her movements agile and playful. But the more time Ma spent with her, the more she realized Bug was different. There was a profound gentleness to her, a lack of the typical bobcat aloofness and aggression Ma had read about and witnessed in documentaries. The time came for the difficult conversation with Sarah. "She's doing remarkably well, Ma," Sarah said over the phone. "We've been talking to a couple of sanctuaries, potential release programs down the line, but they're very selective." Ma took a deep breath. "Sarah, I don't think Bug is a candidate for release, and I don't think I can give her up." There was a pause. "America, are you sure? This is a bobcat, not a house cat. You know the complexities, the permits." "I know, but Bug, she's not like other bobcats. She's incredibly gentle and she hugs me. Sarah actually hugs me." Ma knew how insane it sounded. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "A hug?" "Yes." "She puts her paws around me and rests her head on my shoulder. She does it every day. It's her way of connecting." Sarah, who had seen her fair share of unusual animal behaviors, was intrigued. "All right, Ma. If you're serious, We can start looking into the legalities. It'll be a mountain of paperwork. You'll need specific licenses, enclosure requirements that are far beyond what you have now for temporary care. Are you prepared for that commitment for her entire life? Yes, Ma said without a shred of doubt. Bug had become more than a foster. She was a lifeline. In caring for Bug, Ma had found a piece of her own broken heart beginning to mend. The next month was a bureaucratic whirlwind. Ma navigated a labyrinth of state and federal regulations, applied for exotic animal permits, and consulted with wildlife experts and specialized veterinarians. She hired contractors to build a large secure outdoor enclosure attached to her house complete with naturalistic features. Trees to climb, rocks to sunbathe on, a small pool, and multiple denning spots. It cost a significant portion of her savings, but she didn't hesitate. During this period of uncertainty and endless paperwork, Bug was her constant, calming presence. Whenever Ma felt overwhelmed, she would sit with Bug, who was now too large for the spare room enclosure and had a temporary robust setup in the barn. Bug would approach, offer her signature gentle embrace around Ma's arm or leg, and her quiet purr would seem to absorb Ma's anxiety. Finally, the day came when the last permit was approved. Custody of Lily Bug Thorn, the Bobcat, was officially granted to Ma. A wave of relief so profound washed over Ma that she sank to her knees and wept. Bug, sensing her distress, patted over and pushed her head under Ma's arm, then leaned her furry body into Ma's side. A silent, comforting hug. "We did it, Bug," Ma whispered, burying her face in the Bobcat's soft, spotted fur. "You're home." Life with Bug settled into a new rhythm. Bug was not a pet in the traditional sense. She was a wild animal with specific needs and instincts. Ma respected that, providing Bug with an environment that was as close to natural as possible within the confines of safety and legality. Bug spent her days exploring her spacious enclosure, pouncing on wind-blown leaves, napping in sunbeams, and watching the world go by with those unervingly wise amber eyes. But the hugging continued, and it wasn't just for Ma. Her closest friend, Ella Lehner, a retired schoolteacher who lived in the nearby town, was initially skeptical. "A bobcat? Ma, are you sure you haven't bitten off more than you can chew, dear?" When Ella Lehner first visited after Bug was settled in her permanent enclosure, she stood at a nervous distance. Ma was inside, giving Bug a fresh bowl of water. Bug, after a curious glance at Eleanor through the strong mesh, finished her drink, and then, to Eleanor's astonishment, ambled towards Ma. She stood on her hind legs, wrapped her front paws gently around Ma's waist, and rested her head against Ma's hip for a few seconds. Ma simply smiled and stroked her head. Ella Lehner's jaw dropped. "Did I just see? Did that bobcat just hug you?" Ma chuckled. "She does that. That's Bug." Over time, Bug grew accustomed to Ella Lehner's regular visits. One afternoon, Ma and Ella Lehner were sitting on a bench just outside the enclosure, sipping tea. Bug, who had been dozing on a high rock, woke up, stretched languidly, and sauntered over to the mesh closest to Eleanor. She rubbed her cheek against the wire, her purr a low rumble. Then she sat looking at Eleanor with calm curiosity. "Go on, Elle," Ma encouraged gently. "She's just saying hello." Hesitantly, Ella Lehner reached out a hand towards the mesh. Bug didn't flinch. Instead, she leaned into the touch, allowing Ella Lehner to scratch behind her tufted ears. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, Bug lifted a paw and gently pressed it against the mesh right where Ella Lehner's hand had been. It wasn't a swat, not a grab. It was a soft, sustained touch. Ella Lehner pulled her hand back, her eyes wide and misty. "Oh, America, she's extraordinary." Bug's fame, or rather the curiosity surrounding her, began to spread locally. Ma was careful, never exploiting Bug or putting her in stressful situations. But for trusted friends or fellow wildlife enthusiasts who understood the boundaries, she would occasionally allow supervised interactions, always with Bug's comfort as the priority. One such visitor was young Leo, the grandson of Ma's neighbor, Mr. Henderson. Mr. Henderson was a gruff, elderly farmer who initially viewed Ma's menagerie with suspicion. "Wild animals belong in the wild," he'd grumbled more than once. But Leo, a quiet, sensitive 10-year-old who was struggling after his parents' recent divorce, was fascinated by animals. Mr. Henderson, despite his reservations, brought Leo over one day, ostensibly to drop off some spare lumber Ma had asked for. While the adults talked, Leo stood mesmerized by Bug's enclosure. Bug, in turn, seemed equally intrigued by the small human. She came to the fence line, sat down, and just watched him with her calm, amber eyes. Ma, seeing the boy's gentle demeanor, invited him closer. "This is Bug, Leo. She's very special." Leo slowly approached, his gaze fixed on the beautiful cat. Bug mirrored his stillness. Then she did something Ma had rarely seen her do with a new person so quickly. She lay down near the mesh, rolled slightly onto her side, exposing a sliver of her spotted belly, and let out a soft chuff. Ma explained to Leo, "That's a friendly sound. It means she feels comfortable." Then Bug reached out a paw, extending it slowly through a wider gap in the mesh, not towards Leo, but placing it gently on the ground between them as if an offering. Leo, his eyes shining, very slowly reached out his own small hand and placed it near Bug's paw. Bug didn't move, just let her paw rest there. After a few moments, Bug drew her paw back and then, replicating the gesture she'd shown Ma countless times, she pressed herself lightly against the mesh where Leo stood, her head tilted. It wasn't a full hug through the barrier, but the intent was unmistakable. Leo gasped, a small joyous sound. She likes me," Mr. Henderson, who had been watching with a stern face, found his expression softening. He cleared his throat. "Well, I'll be smart cat." From that day on, Leo was a regular visitor. He'd bring Bug little gifts, a brightly colored leaf, a smooth stone, and would sit by her enclosure, sometimes talking to her softly, sometimes just sharing the silence. Bug, in her own quiet way, always acknowledged him, often coming to the mesh to sit with him, offering her gentle presence and the occasional soft press of her paw or head. Ma saw lightness return to Leo's eyes, a small measure of healing facilitated by a creature who communicated in the universal language of gentle touch. There were heart-wrenching moments, too. Reminders of Bug's wild origins and the precariousness of life. One spring, a distemper outbreak swept through the local raccoon population. Ma was terrified for Bug, even though Bug was vaccinated and her enclosure secure. For weeks, Ma lived in a state of heightened anxiety, meticulously disinfecting everything. Her worry a constant knot in her stomach. During those tense weeks, Bug seemed acutely aware of Ma's distress. Her hugs became more frequent, more lingering, as if she were trying to absorb Ma's fear. She would follow Ma's movements from within her enclosure, her amber eyes full of an almost human understanding. One evening, as Ma was doing her final check, overwhelmed by exhaustion and worry, she leaned against the mesh of Bug's enclosure, tears silently tracing paths down her cheeks. Bug came to her, not with a playful nudge, but with a quiet gravity. She pushed her head firmly into Ma's hand, then stood on her hind legs, pressing her furry body as close as the wire would allow, her paws resting gently on Ma's arms. She stayed there for a long time, purring deeply, a steady, rhythmic comfort in the twilight. In that moment, Ma didn't feel like a caretaker and a wild animal. They were simply two souls offering solace to one another. The distemper threat eventually passed, leaving Bug untouched. But the memory of Bug's unwavering comfort during that period remained deeply etched in Ma's heart. Years passed. Bug grew into a magnificent adult bobcat, sleek and powerful, yet retaining that extraordinary gentleness. Her official name, Lily, was rarely used. She was and always would be Bug. She became a quiet legend in their small corner of Oregon. People Ma met would often ask, Are you the lady with the hugging bobcat? America, now in her late 60s, found her days filled with a profound sense of peace and purpose. The sharp edges of her grief for David had softened, replaced by a gentle warmth that Bug had somehow helped rekindle. Bug was more than a rescued animal. She was a companion, a confidant, a furry, four-legged therapist who communicated not with words, but with the profound eloquence of a gentle touch, a comforting presence, a heartfelt hug. One sunny afternoon, Ma sat on her porch swing, a photo album open on her lap. It was filled with pictures of David, of their life together, and now increasingly of Bug. Bug herself was in her enclosure, sunbathing on her favorite flat rock, the picture of contentment. Ella Laner joined her, bringing a tray with lemonade and cookies. Reminiscing, dear. Ma smiled, a genuine, untroubled smile, just feeling grateful for everything, for David, for this life, and for that incredible creature over there. She looked towards Bug, who, as if sensing she was the topic of conversation, opened one amber eye and looked back at Ma. Bug then slowly rose, stretched, and ambled over to the side of the enclosure closest to the porch. She sat, watching Ma with that familiar, loving gaze. "You know," Ma said softly, her voice filled with emotion, "when I first went to that rescue center, I was just going to foster a bobcat cub. I was determined to keep my distance, to not get attached. I thought my heart had closed up for good after David." She paused, then continued. "But Bug, she had other plans. She didn't just capture my heart. She reminded me it could still open, still feel. She showed me that even in the wildest of creatures, there can be an immense capacity for gentleness, for connection." As if on cue, Bug stood on her hind legs, reached her paws through the mesh as far as she could, and gently patted the air in Ma's direction. A familiar gesture that always made Ma's heart swell. Ma knew that their time together, like all precious things, was finite. But for now, in the golden light of that Oregon afternoon, surrounded by the quiet sounds of nature and the unwavering affection of a bobcat who didn't growl but hugged, Ma Thorne felt an overwhelming sense of joy. Bug had not only found a home, she had created one, a sanctuary of love and understanding where even the most unlikely of bonds could blossom, proving that sometimes the most profound connections are found in the quietest embraces, a silent language of the heart understood by human and animal alike. And in that, Ma found her own wild, wounded soul truly and finally healed.